They told me the strangest part of joining the military wasn't the drills, the weapons, or even the constant exhaustion. It was the silence. The way the world could suddenly go dead, quiet out in the field, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something you couldn't see. Back then, I didn't believe them. To me, going to the field sounded almost relaxing. I thought it meant open grassy areas, some tents, maybe a bit like camping with rifles. But I was wrong. The field wasn't some clearing. It was the jungle, the mountains, the desert. It was anywhere the military wanted to test how long you could last without comfort, without safety, without sleep. And when you're stripped down to nothing but the gear on your back, you start noticing things most people never do. Sounds, shadows, figures that don't belong. I learned that lesson the hard way in Bridgeport, California. We were there for mountain warfare training. Thin air, freezing winds, and nights so quiet your own heartbeat sounded too loud. Before we deployed, the instructors warned us that altitude could play tricks on our bodies, hallucinations, dizziness, shortness of breath. At first, I thought they were just covering their bases. But some of the older guys whispered different stories about Marines waking up to find strange footprints around their camps, or eyes glinting just beyond the firewatch's reach. We laughed about it, called them skinwalker tales, morale jokes. Still, when night came, I felt that nervous edge every time the clouds hit the moon. My squad set up near a rock face, tarps tied off to a tree, pinned down with heavy stones and stakes. It was cold enough that every breath felt like broken glass in my chest. By 9 at night, snow was already falling, thin flakes drifting down onto our gear. We crawled into our bags early, trying to trap whatever heat we had left. That's when I woke to the sound. A sharp, metallic clack. Not just any sound, I knew it instantly. It was the distinct racking of an M4 charging handle. The kind of noise that cuts through silence like a blade. I froze. Out here, nobody makes unnecessary noise. Not unless they want a sergeant breathing down their neck. I turned my head slowly, scanning the dark. My rifle was on the ground next to me. So was my buddy's. The only other weapon nearby was Waterdog's rifle. He was always messing with that damn bayonet of his. I thought maybe he was at it again. "Yo," I whispered. "Was that you?" He sat up, bleary-eyed, and shook his head. Didn't touch it. My skin prickled. Someone was out there. Someone close. I grabbed my knife and slid out from under the tarp, moving low, ready to catch some joker trying to spook us. The snow crunched faintly under my boots as I rounded the tree. Nothing. Just the endless black line of the forest, the wind dragging through branches. Then a voice cut through the dark. "Oscar, what the hell are you doing?" It was my sergeant, stepping out of his lean-to. He squinted at the knife in my hand. "You heard it too?" "Yeah," I said, trying to sound calm, like someone racked a rifle. His jaw tightened. "Thought it was you guys. Firewatch swears it wasn't them either." We stood there for a moment, listening. The silence felt heavy, like it wanted to bury us. Finally, he told us to go back to sleep. Act like it was nothing. But nothing doesn't tear down tarps. When we woke at dawn, our shelter was destroyed. The tarps had been ripped clean off the tree, stones gone, stakes missing as if they'd been yanked out and carried away. Gear scattered. No tracks in the snow except our own. I remember staring at the bare ground, trying to make sense of it, when my sergeant finally admitted what he saw. He said that after sending us back to our bags, he noticed something on the rock face above. A figure. Pale. Hairless. Human shape, but not human. Its eyes reflected in the dark like an animal's. It watched him, and when it realized he saw it, it ducked away behind the rock in a blink. He told us he kept quiet because he thought the altitude was messing with his head. But now, with our camp torn apart, he wasn't so sure. Neither was I. That night still burns in my memory, not because of what we lost, but because of what we never saw. The thing that moved without sound, stronger and quieter than any Marine I've ever known. The thing that stood over us while we slept, close enough to tear the tarps from the ground. And the eyes. Always the eyes. I didn't say anything when we formed up that morning. You learn early that fear spreads faster than cold, and we already had enough of both. We shoved the tarps and cordage into packs that now felt heavier than they should, and we moved off that ridge with our rifles hanging at low ready like they were secrets. Nobody cracked a joke. Even Waterdog kept quiet, his dumb bayonet sheathed and forgotten. On paper, it was a simple day. Move, recon, set up, rehearse. But it felt like we were being herded. The wind chased us across the ridgelines, teasing the treetops until they hissed. The smell of sap and wet rock clung to everything. The light up there plays tricks, clouds moving fast, shadows sliding where nothing's moving on the ground. If you stare long enough, you start seeing faces in bark, shoulders in stumps, ribs in the spaces between branches. I try to logic it out. The altitude, the cold, the way the rock face amplified sounds last night. Maybe that metallic clack wasn't a charging handle at all. Maybe it was just a branch under tension, breaking in the freeze and snapping back against stone. It's close when you hear them side by side. The brain fills in what it wants. Still, those missing stakes, those stones gone, the eyes. We spent the afternoon running reps on a high LZ. LZL, bitter wind, knife down from the pass, and made a drum out of the helicopter pad. We moved in that practiced, quiet way. Gloves brushing buckles, boots landing heel to toe, heads down when the gusts kicked grit. Every so often I catch our sergeant scanning the rock line above the timber. He didn't say it, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing I was. The high ground watched us last night, and it would again if we let it. At last light, we built a new shelter. Different tree, same lean-to footprint, but this time we ran extra cord. I double-wrapped the trunk, pulled the guy lines flat, sank the stakes deeper with a small entrenching tool until the soil bit back. Water Dog found larger rocks and rolled them into place with a shoulder. We made it look like the manual illustration, and then we made it tighter than the manual would have asked. We set a formal fire watch, 2-hour rotations, overlapping by 15 minutes. Noise discipline, light discipline, the kind of discipline that makes you feel like a child holding its breath. I volunteered for the first shift because I knew the dark would be mean to me if I lay down before I borrowed a little power back from it. My world narrowed to the sweep of the tree line, the quick snow that came and went, the hiss of my own scarf when I swallowed. You can hear the altitude in the body, airlocks in your ears that won't pop, blood pushing harder to do the same work. At some point the cold gnawed through my gloves and found the bones in my fingers. That's when I started to think about last night's sound again, the neat mechanical memory of emotion I've done 1,000 times. Pull, release, metal rides home. It's a clean noise. It's also a lure if you want it to be. I heard nothing like it for the first hour. Just the creak of branches and the occasional gnat of powder snow flitting past the tarp edge. A hair moved once, out in the gray. I could tell by the way the snow parted and then filled behind it, soundless, like someone erasing a line. I swapped out with Ramirez and crawled into the bag. My sleeping system felt like a coffin the second I zipped it. The senses don't shut off up there. They just get weird. The fabric amplified my breath until it sounded like a stranger right next to me, and my mind built a body around the sound because that's what minds do. I must have fallen asleep. I woke to pressure on the cord above me. A small, high tension, like a hand testing a banister. My eyes opened into a darkness with texture. For a second, I thought it was the tarp flexing in the wind, but the air was dead. The pressure lifted. Somewhere close, something brushed nylon with care, not curiosity. Care. I slid one hand out of the bag, slow, and found my knife again. The tarp edge glowed faintly. Snow was falling heavier now, turning the lean-to's shadow into a dull lantern. I held still long enough to hear my pulse break the quiet into pieces. Then that other sound came, the not quite metal, the almost charging handle. A clack that wasn't clean this time. A clack with a fiber to it, like what under strain, followed by a tiny crumble of grit from the rock behind us. I didn't speak. The first rule of being prey is don't tell the forest where you are. The pressure returned, lower now, closer to my boots, then skittered off like fingers tasting canvas, seams for an opening. Another cord vibrated above my head and settled. Whatever was outside wasn't ripping or tearing. It was learning us. My sergeant's whisper cut through the quiet from the other lean-to. One up. I breathed through my mouth to keep the sound small. Up. Eyes. I eased the zipper, pushed the tarp edge with the back of my knuckles, and let the snow kiss my glove. Outside, the dark had layers, tree, rock, drift, and a hole in the texture that wasn't any of those things. The hole crouched where the trunk met the boulder, an absence shaped like a person who'd forgotten how to stand. No hair, no uniform silhouette, limbs too long for balance, too close to the ground for comfort. It didn't flash its eyes at me the way deer do. It absorbed the faint light and gave none back, as if the eyes were made to swallow. Ramirez, my sergeant, breathed, somewhere left. Don't move. The thing, because I refused to call it a person, reached one arm out along the ground, forearm and upper arm too equal in length, hand flattening like a swimmer's palm. It pressed the core between middle and ring finger and slid the not a fraction of an inch, like it was tasting tension. It paused. It turned its head, not up at us, but sideways, aligning the narrow of its face with the line of the cord. Listening to the rope, I felt my heartbeat in my knife handle. My mouth was dry as chalk. Somehow, in the middle of that fluorescent panic, the practical part of me registered one detail that still turns my stomach. The skin had that thin, wet look you only see on living things. Not pale like paper, pale like a tongue. And I swear to you, it smelled slightly sweet, like sap left too long in heat. My sergeant shifted a boot, the smallest scrape, and the thing went flat in an instant. No recoil, no startle. It poured into the ground like it had been a shadow the whole time, and had only been pretending to have bones for our benefit. I lost it against the trunk. The snow thickened. Somewhere behind the rock, a small piece broke loose and ticked down the face, that almost metal clack again. And this time I could hear how the first one had fooled me. Rock mimics readiness very well if you want it to. We didn't move for a long time. When the snow eased, the cord above me stopped humming. A minute later, 2, 5, it's hard to count time when you're watching the dark for teeth. Our sergeant tapped his heel twice. Our signal. We drew in slow. The forest waited with us. By 4:30 in the morning, with the sky still bruised, we packed quietly, every motion careful enough to be prayer. The stakes came up with a wet pop. The rocks rolled back to where rocks roll from. We left no candy wrapper, no footprint we didn't have to. The cold got cleaner as we moved, like we were walking out of someone else's breath. Halfway down the slope, I looked back. The ridgeline was a saw against the first thin gray of morning. That's when I saw it again, or I told myself I did. A head and shoulders at the top of the rock, right where the wind sheared past, still as a notch cut into the sky. Watching us go. It didn't duck this time. It didn't need to. We made the road by sunrise. A truck came up coughing diesel, and the smell felt like civilization had come back for us. Everybody loosened a little, the way you do when noise returns and silence stops being the authority. Water Dog finally made his joke about the bayonet. Nobody laughed until he said the Hilton line, and then we all laughed too hard because relief is a stupid thing. That should have been the end of it. A mountain story you tell new guys to make them pay attention during Firewatch. But stories have long legs, and they follow you to duty stations you've never seen. Months later, halfway across the country, on a night so black it turned the woods into a mouth, I found out Bridgeport hadn't been a one-off. Whatever lives on ridgelines has cousins in flatter places, and they know how to climb. Because that night in Wisconsin, when I looked up and saw the face peeking around the trunk 30 feet in the air, I didn't think ghost or animal. I thought, you again. When I transferred to Wisconsin for training, I told myself the Bridgeport thing had been altitude sickness. My brain had misfired in the thin air, made shadows into bodies, made noises into threats. I want to believe that. Needed to. But the first night of land navigation at Fort McCoy stripped that excuse from me and left me bare. The Army sells Nightland NAV as a skill test. Plot your points, find your stakes, prove you can move alone in the dark. No buddy team, no fire team, just you, a map, and the kind of silence that squeezes every mistake into something fatal. It was 8:30 at night when I stepped off with my compass and my red lens light. The woods were damp, thick, the kind of trees that blot out sky and keep the air colder than it should be. My route took me out along a set of ridges, then in a low brush, then up again. The points were easy to plot, and the first few came without much trouble. The forest was busy, owls hooting, wind creaking, the occasional scatter of leaves when something small moved through them. I even saw 2 of my guys passing below me on the hill, white light flashing stupidly against their maps. I barked at them to kill it before they gave themselves away, and the way they jumped told me they hadn't expected me there. That was normal, training normal. But when they were gone, and the forest settled again, I noticed how alone I really was. No red bobbing lights in the distance anymore. No movement, no boots crunching. Just me and the dark. I sat on a hillside around 10 at night, eating Skittles that had gone rock hard in my pocket, and for a few minutes I actually enjoyed the quiet. The clouds kept rushing the moon, giving me glimpses of clear outlines, then smothering it again, a rhythm I could almost trust. Then I saw it. In the clearing ahead, where prairie grass met the tree-line, there was an old, dead stump, 15 feet tall, split near the top. At first it looked normal, just jagged wood, but then a shape resolved against the backlit clouds. A head, shoulders, the silhouette of someone perched on the broken tree, motionless. I thought it had to be another soldier, maybe some idiot who'd climbed up there to prove a point, or just to mess with me. So I walked closer, whispering, "Hey, you stuck? You need a hand." The shadow twitched, not shifted, not moved naturally, twitched like a puppet jerked on a string. The head turned toward me, slow, deliberate, and something in the way it moved drained the humor right out of me. The moon broke the clouds at that exact moment. Silver light spilled across the clearing. It wasn't a soldier. Its limbs were wrong, too long, stretched thin like a starving man. Its skin caught the moon in patches, pale and slick. The face, God, the face looked pinched in the middle. Eyes and mouth shrunk down, so small the rest of the skull looked empty. Hollow, like it had been carved and left unfinished. My breath fogged. It saw me. I know it did. And it clung to that stump like a spider, fingers dug deep into the wood before it began to move. Not down like a climber, not careful. It scurried, fast, efficient, like gravity didn't matter. I fumbled my headlamp, flicking the switch through its cycle. Red flash, off. White flash, my fingers shaking so bad I nearly dropped it. The brief strobe of red caught it low, on all fours, sprinting toward the brush line exactly where I was heading. Its limbs worked like a hunting animal, elbows and knees splayed wrong, palms slapping earth. By the time I got the white beam steady, the tree-line was empty, silent. I froze, knife in my hand, eyes sweeping left and right. My brain screamed at me to stay put, but another voice, older, drilled into me, said never stop moving when you're in the open. So I edged sideways, picking a new path toward the road I knew was out there. My boots crunched leaves, and then, 10 meters out, something moved with me. A rustle in the brush, a scrape of weight against bark. Parallel, tracking. I broke, bolted. Branches clawed at me, slapped my face, dragged my gear. I tripped on a down log, went sprawling, scrambled back up with mud in my teeth. Behind me the woods came alive with sound, scraping, crashing, as if something big and hungry was pushing through the trees to cut me off. I caught a glimpse when I risked one glance back, a pale leg vanishing into the brush, impossibly thin, jointed wrong. An arm bracing as it slid deeper, fast as a predator doubling back. My lungs burned. My body wanted to collapse, but fear kept me upright. I staggered toward the road, praying for the shine of asphalt. And when I broke through the tree-line, I nearly sobbed with relief. But it didn't stop. From high up, 30 feet or more, a branch cracked. I snapped my head back, and there it was, a face peeking from behind the trunk, pale oval gleaming in the moonlight. Eyes too small, mouth too narrow, head tilted like a bird curious about prey. I didn't wait. I ran until my legs gave out, until diesel headlights cut the dark and I stumbled into the rally point covered in mud, chest heaving, eyes wild. When they asked me why I was out of breath, why I was shaking, I lied. I said I'd gotten lost, tripped in a creek bed, ran to make up time. Nobody pressed. Nobody wanted the truth. Because the truth was that Bridgeport hadn't been a fluke. Whatever lives in the mountains lives in the woods too, and it likes to follow. I couldn't sleep the night after Fort McCoy. Not in the barracks. Not in the safety of a cot surrounded by 30 other guys. Not even with the hum of the heaters and the stink of boot polish and sweat filling the air. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale, oval face peering down from the tree line. Small eyes, pinched mouth, head cocked just enough to tell me it was measuring me. Not as a threat, but as food. The guys joked about the mud still caked on my camis, about how I must have belly flopped into every puddle between my start point and the trucks. I forced a laugh, because that's what you do. You keep the mask tight. You don't tell them the real reason you were shaking. You don't tell them something in the woods moved like it owned the ground, and you were just another animal on its land. But the silence weighed heavier than the lie. Weeks turned into months, and I kept coming back to it. The way it scurried down the stump without hesitation. The way it kept pace with me, like it could have cut me off any time it wanted but didn't. The way the forest went dead quiet when it was close, like everything else had learned to hide from it. Some nights I lay awake thinking about Bridgeport again, about how our tarps had been torn down, the stakes gone, the rocks rolled out of place. It hadn't been the wind. It hadn't been altitude sickness. That thing had been testing us back then too. Probing. Seeing how we reacted. And maybe Wisconsin wasn't random either. Maybe they know how to move from ridge to ridge, from forest to forest. Maybe there are more than one. The thought kept me sharp. On patrols, I scanned more than I needed to. In training, I checked the tree line until my eyes blurred. Every sound, every snapped twig, every brush of wind against nylon sent me back to that clearing. And when I finally rotated out, I told myself it was over, that I'd left the pale things behind with the rest of my service. But the world doesn't let you off that easy. I started hearing stories. Other Marines, other Guardsmen, even a Brit and a German who'd trained in forests across the Atlantic. None of them used the word crawler or rake like the internet does, but the details were the same. Pale, hairless figures too long-limbed to be human, eyes reflecting wrong, movements that belonged to trees and shadows more than flesh. One guy swore it had followed him along a ridgeline during a march in the Alps. Another said it had slipped into camp during a rainstorm and left claw-like gouges in his pack straps. They laughed it off when they told the stories, but you could see it in their eyes. They weren't laughing on the inside. I thought about Firewatch then, about how the manuals and instructors hammered the point that even in training, even when you think you're safe, you don't sleep unguarded. At first, I thought it was just about discipline, about getting us used to the grind. But now I wonder if it's older than that. Maybe some sergeant, decades ago, saw what I saw. Maybe Firewatch isn't just a tradition, it's survival. The worst part wasn't what I saw, though. It was what I didn't. That night in Wisconsin, after I stumbled onto the road and ran, there was a stretch of silence. Long, breathless silence. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. Because silence doesn't mean it's gone. Silence means it's waiting. I remember staring back into the tree line, chest still heaving, trying to pierce the dark. And that's when the branch broke 30 feet up, and I saw its face peeking. Still there. Still watching. Still deciding. It didn't chase me onto the road. It didn't have to, because now it had me. Not in its hands, not in its teeth, but in my head. Every night, every shadow, every creak of wood in the dark, it's there. And if it's in my head, it can wait forever. I thought time would dull it. That with enough distance, the faces would fade, the sounds would blur, and the fear would turn into just another story. But years later, I still wake up at 2 in the morning, convinced I hear a charging handle being racked somewhere, just outside my window. I'll lie there in the dark, holding my breath, waiting for the tarp to collapse over me again, waiting for those pale fingers to slide along the seams. The worst part is how easy it is to convince yourself you imagined it. That's what the military wants, right? Keep your head down. Don't stir panic. Write it off as altitude, exhaustion, shadows. I tried that. For months I told myself I was losing it. That Bridgeport had been bad air, Wisconsin had been nerves. But deep down I know better. Because the details line up. Bridgeport. The tarps pulled down, stakes gone, rocks rolled away. No sound, no footprints. Something deliberate. Fort McCoy. The stump, the sprint, the branch breaking 30 feet up. Too calculated to be an animal. Too quiet to be a man. Both times it let me go. That's what keeps me up at night. It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't desperate. It was patient. It had the discipline of a predator that knows it can wait until the prey makes the mistake. I've tried to explain it to myself in ways that don't make my skin crawl. A mutant? A freak of nature? Some hairless Bigfoot variant? But none of those ideas explain the silence. The way the forest itself seemed to go still when it was near. It was like the woods knew it better than I did and wanted no part of it. I've heard more stories since then. Not just Marines, not just Guardsmen. Brits in Germany. Canadians in their northern forests. Even hikers, hunters, people who don't know the word crawler, but describe the same pale, long-limbed figure watching from tree lines or crouched on rock faces. The accents change. The geography changes, but the stories don't. You start to wonder, how many of these things are out there? Is it one creature that moves? Or is it a pattern, a species that knows how to stay just out of sight? And if they're that good at hiding, how many more times have they been close and we didn't even notice? That's the part that gnaws at me. Maybe Bridgeport wasn't my first time. Maybe Wisconsin wasn't my second. Maybe they've been watching longer. Maybe they still are. I keep my windows locked now. Always. When I walk past a tree line, I don't let my eyes linger on the shadows. And I never, ever ignore the silence. Because silence means something's waiting. So if you ever find yourself out in the field, whether it's mountains, jungle, or forest, don't think you're alone just because the patrol's over and the fire watch is quiet. Don't think it's just you in the cold. If the air goes still, if the night feels too heavy, if you hear a sound that doesn't belong, stay awake. Because once you see those eyes, you'll never stop wondering when they'll decide it's your turn.